Welcome to another video tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at creating loops or looping actions. So these will be things that you want to happen over and over and over again, whether it be throughout the entirety of your game or just for a period of time while something happens over and over again and then it stops. So I've set up a scenario here where I've got this tree that's going to grow over a period of time. And I'm going to show you 3 ways that we can create this sort of effect. So the first is to go into the script editor, create a new script which we'll call grow tree. And what we can do is we can use what's called a while loop. So if we drag that into our script, so this is what a while loop looks like in the code. While, and then you have your conditional expression, which is going to be while this thing is true, do this. So what we want to do is we want the tree to grow over a period of time. So what we can do is we can go to our game configuration, or actually perhaps the best thing to do is actually to go into the map editor, select our tree, go to the entity properties. The first thing I'm going to do is give it an ID, an entity ID. So I'll call this gtree1. And what we want to do is go down to where it says custom properties and give it a custom property, which can be a, let's make it a number actually. Let's delete that one. And this is going to be called growth. And it's going to start at 0. So with that set up, what we can do is we can go back to our script, make sure the map is saved, go back to our script, and we can say while entity gtree1 dot property growth not equal to, I think it's going to be 4 because it starts at 0, then do everything in this while loop. So what do we want this while loop to do? So what I want it to do is I want, first of all, to create a local variable at the very top of this script, which is going to be an incrementing number. So I'm going to call this growth equals 0. And what we want to do is we first of all want to increment. In fact, it should start at 1. We're going to increment the value by 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say entity gtree1 dot frame equals $growth. So it's going to set the frame, in this case, to 2 because it starts at 1. And then the first time the while loop kicks in, it's going to first of all set it to 2 because it's going to increment it by 1. It's going to set the frame to 2 because it starts at 1. So it's going to set the frame to the next frame. And it's going to set the property to 2, or 1 actually, because we're starting the property itself at 0, but it's gone on to the next stage. So property growth will now be, we probably want to plus that actually, so it's a continuous loop. So that's going to be incremented by 1, so 0 is going to become 1. And then we want to wait, and then in the wait, this is going to be how long between each growth stage do we want the tree to stay at. So just for the sake of the video, I'm going to make a 5-second wait. But obviously if you're doing a realistic farming sim or something where something's going to grow over a realistic period of time, this might be, 60 seconds or something. And you can work out in seconds. If you wanted an hour, for example, you would work out in seconds what that would be, and you would put that in the wait. I'm not sure if there's a limit to how many seconds can be in a wait, but there are other ways which you could also force an hour if the wait didn't go that far. But anyway, you specify the amount of time that you want this loop to take going around each time. And that's essentially a while loop. This is it. It should now work. What's going to happen is it's going to start by setting up a local variable called growth, which starts at 1. And then it's going to say, while the property growth on this specific entity, in this case the tree, is not equal to 4, which it doesn't start equal to 4, it starts at 0, then it's going to do this over and over again. So what it's going to do is it's going to increment the growth variable to 2. It's going to set the frame of the tree to that frame, so it's going to become frame 2. So you're going to see the tree grow. It's then going to update the property on the tree to reflect that it's gone up a stage in the growth stage, but it's still not going to be equal to 4. It's now going to be at 1. It's then going to wait 5 seconds, and then because it's not equal to 4, it's going to do it all over again. So this is going to increment and become 3. It's going to set the frame of the tree to then 3. It's going to update the property one more stage, but it's still not going to be 4. And it will just keep going around until it gets to 4, and then it will stop. What we can do at the very end is we can add a display message. Let's just scroll down so you can see it. We'll add a display message that says the tree has fully grown. Just so that we know the loop has finished and it's done its thing. So if we click apply and save, this is our script. This is what it looks like if you were doing it via Visual Script. So it's an assign value setting the growth to 1, a while loop where while this condition is not valid, it should do all of these things. So increment the value, increment the frame, increment the property, wait 5 seconds, and then basically come back round over and over and over again. Once it's done that, end by doing a display message. Okay, so this is our script, grow tree. So let's run the game and see what happens. So here we are in the game. Here's my undeveloped tree. Let's go and walk and stand beside it so we can see it fully. And let's run the grow tree script. And this is going to start a while loop, which is going to grow that tree. Here we go. The tree is fully grown. So obviously the tree was fully grown 5 seconds before the message popped up. So what you might want to do is have the message pop up at the same time as it's fully grown, but you get the idea. So there's our very simple while loop. Now you need to be careful with while loops because they can be quite expensive, because basically it's going to be constantly checking every single 5 seconds. It's going to be checking a property to see if it's equal something. So depending on how frequently you're re-executing these loops, it can be quite expensive on the frames of your game. And another thing to be careful of as well with loops, while loops, is if you're saving your game, sometimes it can cause the game to crash. It all depends on what your while loop is doing. If your while loop is doing an awful lot of things, like this is only growing one single tree, but if it was managing a whole farm of trees and they're all individually growing at different rates and you've got multiple while loops doing all of that stuff, that could cause a save game request to crash. So what I want to talk about next is some other loops that you can do aside from the while loop that are a bit more safer to use when it comes to both resource load, but also less likely to cause a crash because it's not constantly having to check all the time. So the first of those is what's called looping scripts. So not to be confused with a script that loops, which is what this is. But looping scripts are basically scripts that just keep triggering themselves over and over again. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say we wanted on startup the tree to automatically start growing. So what we can do is we can go into our startup script where we load into the map. And what we want to do is we want to kickstart off the growth of this tree. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in what's called an execute script function. And what this basically does is it's going to trigger a separate script to the one that we're currently in at the moment. So it's how you fire off a different script from another script. So in this case, the startup script is going to execute another script once this one is, in this case, loaded the map. So what we want to do is we want to execute grow tree so that in the startup script, when it's finished loading the map, it will then automatically execute the next script. In this case, grow tree. Make sure in this case, because we're going to be looping this, that you don't tick pause until complete. Because if you had anything after the execute script, let's say, for example, we had a display message here, this will most likely never execute, because when this executes, we're going to set this up to just keep executing, which means this would then never happen. So make sure that if you are going to have a script that's going to be constantly going round and round and round, in a startup script that triggers it, don't tick this. So this script can continue on past this request and do the rest of its thing. Okay? We're not going to have a display message, so we'll leave that. But we are going to execute grow tree. So what I want to do now is save the startup script and go back to the grow tree script and make some changes, because we're not going to use this while loop anymore. We're going to do this a different way. So what we're going to do is we're going to still use the variable, or are we? No, what we're going to do is we're going to do it via the property, I think. So what we're going to do is we're going to say global, not global, entity gtree1 dot property growth plus equals 1. So that's going to go from 0 to 1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set the frame to equal entity gtree1 dot property growth. So that will set it to the next frame. And then we want to update. Well, actually, we don't need to do that because it's already doing it at the top. So then what we want to do is just wait. Let's say, let's make it a bit shorter this time. Let's just do 3-second wait. And what I might do as well is just do a log message. The tree grows. Now, we need to be mindful here that this script is going to be set up to loop over and over and over and over again. So what we want to do is we want to put an end to that. So we're going to put an if entity gtree1 dot property growth is equal to 5, then less than 5, then do all of this. So as long as it's not fully grown, you want to do all of this over and over again. else display message the tree has fully grown. End. Okay, so I'm just about ready to put the looping bit in, but I just want to check everything first. So if entity less than 5, increment it, then update the frame, show to the screen that the tree has grown, and then waits 3 seconds, and then if it's greater than 5, then show that the tree is fully grown. So here's where the looping bit comes in, because what we're now going to do is we're going to type execute script, and we're going to pass in the same script that we're in. So we're going to say grow tree. So what's basically going to happen is if the property of the tree growth is less than 5, it's going to update the growth value to 1 past what it is already. It's going to show the tree growing by updating the frame. It's going to show to the screen a log message saying that the tree is growing. It's going to wait 3 seconds, and then it's going to execute the script again. So it's going to start this whole process over again, and it's going to check if the growth is less than 5, which it still would be to begin with. So it's going to then do this again. It's going to hit this point. It's going to execute itself again. It's going to keep checking until it's not less than 5, and in which case it's going to come down to here, which means it's not going to execute itself again, and it's just going to display a message and stop the script. So the only other thing I need to do is just quickly change the entity, because I'm going to start the property on 1 so that it matches the frame numbers, because I'm now using this value to directly impact the frames. So with that said, I think we're ready to go. Let me just check one more time. So that's going to make it 2. That should work. Yeah. So let's test this out. So that now what should happen is, just walk through it one more time just so it's clear. In our startup script, at the end of loading the map, it's going to execute the grow tree script. And what the grow tree script does is it checks this condition. And if the condition is not actually true yet, it's going to basically do all of this and end with executing itself again. And then it will come back and do this again until this is true, and then it will come down and do this instead. So let's test it. So there we go. And it should stop as soon as the tree is fully grown. So we're no longer looping through the trees. We can clear log to get rid of those messages. So that's another way of looping a series of actions. So anything that you want to happen over and over and over again, you just put in a single script like this one, put an if check so that you can invalidate it. So if you don't want it to happen throughout your entire game, but there's a point in time where it stops, like in my case, when the tree actually has finished growing, I don't want it to keep looping, then you just put a stop point in your loop that then diverges off to a part of the script that isn't going to keep looping itself over and over again. In this case, because the if goes down to a different path that doesn't have an execute script, it's not then going to execute itself again when it does this particular bit. But every time that this bit is invalid, it's not, or it is less than 5, it's going to keep doing all of this, but then executing itself again, and then keep executing itself again. So if you wanted something that happens forever, then you could just quite simply not put it in an if statement. Let's just clear these away. So now what's going to happen is this script is going to basically, no matter what, it's going to constantly set the growth property +1. It's going to try and set the frame to that number. That's eventually going to stop working because I don't have enough frames for it to continue going on forever. But it's constantly going to show a log message, constantly going to wait 3 seconds, constantly going to display the message tree is fully grown, and then it's going to constantly execute the script over and over and over and over again. So that would be how you would set up a script that just forever loops. Just don't have any means for it to stop. But you have to obviously be careful with that, because if you do want it to stop, this doesn't currently yet have a means for it to stop. To do that, you would put in the if check, because then that gives you a means to falsify it so it stops looping. Okay, so that's another way of looping. And I'm going to show you one last one, which, some might consider time consuming and a bit sort of excessive to set up for a looping system, but it does have some advantages. And I will talk about the advantages, plus a con that you need to be mindful of as well, but it does have some advantages. So it's what I call the pendulum system. So let me show you how this works. And it's actually very easy on a scripting front. It's more something you set up in the map editor. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a tile, in this case, a lift tile. I'm going to place it just over here to the right. I'm going to select it and give it an ID, which I'll just call Plat1. And I'm going to turn it into a moving platform. And I'm going to leave the default waypoint as it is, but I'm going to add another one. Let me just get the coordinates I need. So if that's 3 - 2 - 3, that'll be -4 - 5. So I want -3 - 5. So add waypoint, waypoint 2, -3 - 5, and that should now appear over there. Fantastic. So we've now got our moving platform. Obviously, it's not going to move just yet. The movement speed is obviously the movement speed of the platform. So this is going to be the equivalent to our wait time. So in the script, we set it to wait 3 seconds. Now, this doesn't necessarily equate to seconds. It's just a sort of speed of the platform. So you'll want to experiment with how fast these things are triggering. Okay, but let me just finish setting this up so you can see what the pendulum system is. So we've set up a moving platform. Now currently it's not going to go anywhere. So what we need to do is in our startup script, we need to kickstart this whole process off. So let's just save the map, go to our script editor, go to our startup script. Let's just make sure we've saved this for now. Go to our startup script, remove the execute scripts because we're going to do something different this time. When we start the map, we want to move platform. We want to kickstart this platform to start moving. So the platform is going to be entity by ID, Plat1. And the waypoint name is waypoint 2. That's the one that I created over to the left. And we want to tick this. This is important. Pause until complete. We want to wait until the platform reaches its destination. So we'll save this script. So what we do want to do, once it gets to the destination, we then want to execute a script. So we do need the execute script. We want to execute grow tree. And we're not going to pause until complete. Okay. So when it reaches waypoint 2, it's going to execute this script when it gets there, because pause until complete is ticked. So only when the platform reaches this waypoint is this then going to fire. Okay. So this script is going to be what happens after it gets there. So in this script, this would be where you would then put all your actions. And you don't need to put them in an if, because part of the beauty about a moving platform is you can turn it off any other way you want because it's a moving platform. For one, you could just remove the tile and that would stop the platform entirely and therefore stop the loop entirely. So we don't need to worry about ifs or anything like that for this. We don't need to validate the loop. We can just put in here what should happen each time the platform reaches its destination. So in this case, I want entity gtree to increment its property growth by 1. I then want gtree1.frame to equal entity gtree1.property growth. And then, is there anything else I want to do? Could do log message, but I don't see a need to do that. So now what we do, this is the all important bit, is we move platform entity plat1 to default is the name of the one that gets placed on the platform unless you change it, and we want it to be pause until complete true. And then when it gets there, we want to execute a different script which we haven't created yet, so I'll just quickly type it. This can be grow tree 2. You do need 2 scripts because you need one for each side of the platform. Okay? Because if we executed the same script, it's going to try and keep sending the platform back to itself, back to default where it's already there, and then therefore it's going to just happen. This is going to happen really quickly because there's no time for it to travel. So the wait time is basically dictated by the speed of the platform. Okay, so that's that. So we now need to make another script called growtree2, which is essentially, to all intents and purposes, a duplicate of growtree. So let me just quickly grab everything. Edit, copy, cancel, open growtree2, edit, paste. We want to increment the property each time. We want to increase the frame. We want to move the platform, in this case, back to waypoint 2, pausing until done, and then execute growtree again. Okay, and let's save that. So basically, to walk you through it, what we've basically set up is a system where on startup, once the map is loaded, it starts the platform moving towards its second waypoint. And only when it gets there does it execute script growtree. What growtree then does is it assigns the value, it increments the growth value of the tree. It then updates the frame to that value, so the tree visibly grows. It then starts the platform moving back towards where it came from, and only when it gets back to where it came from does it then trigger a second script called growtree2. Why is that? Should that be in speech marks? Let me just check startup for a second. I'll do it via the drop down list, I think, just to be safe. So this is growtree, so it should execute growtree2, okay? So when it gets back to where it started from, it's then going to execute growtree2. Then what growtree2 does is it, same thing again, it increments the growth of the tree, it updates the frame of the tree, but then it starts moving the platform again back to the one on the left. And only when it gets there does it then execute growtree1 again. And that will send it back, and that will be like a pendulum, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until eternity. So these platforms are basically, they're sending each other. When it gets to one side, it's sending it back to where it came from. And then when it gets there, it's sending it back to where it went, back and forth, back and forth. But each time it gets to a destination, it's doing something first. In this case, it's updating and growing a tree. In your case, it could be playing a sound. It could be playing an effect. It could be showing a message that whatever you want to happen. Okay. Now, let's test this out. Now, obviously, it does have some problems, which I will quickly address after we've tested it, but let's just see if it works. So the pen, it moves, the tree grows, it moves back, it grows some more. So each time it hits a side, it develops the tree. Now this time it's going to error because it's going to try. Oh, it didn't error. That's interesting. I would have sworn that would have errored because it's trying to set a frame on a model that it doesn't have. But okay, it doesn't error. I was expecting to have to deal with an error, but that's kind of cool. But obviously what I haven't done is I haven't catered for the fact that it is still trying to, I mean, let me just check. Let's print, just because I'm curious, let's print entity gtree1 dot property growth, because by now it must be like 10 or something. Yeah, 18. So I don't know why it's not erroring trying to set it to frame 18, but okay, maybe it doesn't error, it just says I can't do it. But anyway, we might want to stop that, for example, so that once the tree has grown, it no longer sends the platforms back and forth, or at the very least it doesn't keep incrementing the property and trying to set the frame. So to do that, again, you would just make sure that in each script you do have an if statement that says if the growth of if the property of the tree is already 5, then don't increment it anymore and don't update the frame. And if you wanted to, you could even stop it from moving the platform back and forth. So let's quickly talk about some things to bear in mind with this approach. So first of all, obviously, at the moment, it's very visible that there's a pendulum system because you can see a lift going back and forth. 2 things to know about this is that obviously we can increase the speed of the platform. So if we set this to 100, then now this tree is going to grow very, very quickly. Yeah, so it's already fully grown. But if we wanted to, if you were doing a more realistic farming sim, you could set this to 1. And obviously we won't actually let this play out, but just to show you what it would be like. Now the tree's going to grow, each stage is going to grow at that kind of rate. So you can see it's going to take a while for the tree to even get to stage 2, let alone fully grow. So you're in complete control with the movement speed of the platform. You could probably even go 0.5 or something. You could probably almost get it stationary, you know. So you're in complete control of how fast these events repeat. Talking about the visibility of the platform, obviously it goes without saying that you could, once you've set the platform up, you can go into the voxel editor and you can either set this transparent or you could just flat out erase the model, save it. And now when you go into the map editor, you have an invisible tile, okay? And if we were to run the game, it should still work, fingers crossed. So if we set the time to 30 again, although we can't see the platform anymore, we should still see the tree grow. Yeah, so the tree's still growing, the platform is moving back and forth, but we can't see it because it's essentially a null, not null, but it's got no voxels, so you can't see anything. Okay. You might also want to set up your moving platforms to be a passable tile, so it doesn't even have any collision. Anything else I want to mention? If I could quit. So a nice thing about the pendulum approach, one of the pros, is that let's set this up, give a good example of this. I'm going to see if I can bring back, this might be wishful thinking here. Oh no, I can bring back the visibility. Let me bring back this for a second. And I'm going to slow the platform down just a second, just to give me time to demonstrate. Let's set it to 10. Give me time to demonstrate what's really cool about the pendulum system. So let me just check what maps I've got. So I've got one called Overworld. Could use that. Let's use that. So if I go into the game and we start off our pendulum, let's let it grow a bit. Okay. Now I'm going to load map Overworld coordinate 0, 0, 0 south. See where the pendulum is? Just past the tree. Okay. Now we're in a different map now. So anything, this is one of the cons that you need to be careful of with the pendulum system, is if we're in a different map, anything that would be looping is now going to stop. So if you wanted your game, regardless of what map you're on, to have something happening all the time, whether it be, something happening on your user interface or messages popping up, they're going to stop now because we're not in a map that has the pendulum that's triggering off those scripts. However, the nice thing about the pendulum, though, is it will automatically, the moment I go back to, I forget the name of the map. Give me a sec. Quick. We go back to quick. It picks up exactly where it left off automatically. So any loops that you've got going based on this pendulum system will, the moment you load back into a map, will pick up where they left off and immediately continue on, which is quite nice. So you have to sort of weigh up what you want. If you want something that's going to run game-wide, then you can obviously set up pendulums on each map that keep it going, or you would use, in that case, an execute script, as one of the forever looping script ideas that I showed earlier, if you wanted it to be game-wide. But if it was just while you're in a map, let's say this is an outside map, and this is the only one you've got, and you want it to rain or lightning or something, then you would have a pendulum system would be a good way to go, because you just set it up for this one map, and as it goes back and forth, it dictates when the actions repeat. Another thing that's nice about the pendulum system is it's very easy to have different things happen at each platform. So, for example, at the moment we've got it so that when it goes to waypoint 2, it does the exact same thing as it does when it goes back to waypoint 1. But you could have it do one thing at waypoint 2 and then do something else at waypoint 1 and alternate looping between those two things. So, for example, you could have it so that when it gets to this side, it plays a sound. When it gets back to this side, it, plays an effect. And it's just going to keep looping between those two. Play a sound, play an effect, play a sound, play an effect. So, in other words, if you wanted to loop between two things, platforms is a very good way of doing that as well, because then you don't have to set up multiple separate while loops. You've got one pendulum that's doing sort of a binary system, this or that, as it goes back and forth. Anyway, so I hope this video has been interesting and useful for putting into your game some semblance of a looping system, if that's what you want to do. As I say, when it comes to loops, just be very careful. You don't have to be so careful with the pendulum system, because it's actually very easy to stop. For example, let me show you how you might stop it. So we've got our tree. Let's stand by it so we can see it growing. But I could just say remove entity plat1 And let's wait till it's just about to hit this side again, just so we can see if it does actually stop the tree growing. So let's stop it now. And so by now it should have grown, and it hasn't. So that's, again, a very simple way of stopping a pendulum loop is just delete the pendulum. The moment the pendulum's gone, anything it was doing now stops. So they're also very easy to stop as well. So it's up to you which ones you do. I just thought I'd do this video to show 3 different ways of creating loops in your games. You pick the one that suits your needs. Pick the one that, you know, as I say, suits your needs. It all depends on, you know, how many things you want looping, you know, and how resource heavy it's going to be. But here's, you know, 3 ways you could set up a looping system. I think the pendulum is the best one that's the least impact on the resources, because in essence, it's not constantly triggering something. It's just moving a platform, and then when it gets there, it triggers something, and then it's moving back, and then when it gets there, it triggers. So there's pauses of inactivity in between each trigger, whereas a loop is constantly checking and looping and checking and looping. So I think that's what makes it so expensive. So I think you would find that the pendulum system probably is less intensive on the CPU. But your mileage may vary on that, so I thought I'd show 3 different ways, and you can pick the one that you want to use. So with that said, that'll wrap up this video on looping. Hope you found it interesting and useful. Stay tuned for the next video.